As Christians, I think we have a tendency to boil down Jesus' identity into just one or two dimensions. We think about him and think of the highlights of his story. He was born, celebrated on Christmas, did ministry, died, was resurrected, celebrated on Easter. Or we boil down his identity into just a few words so it's easier to remember. Jesus is love. Jesus is compassion. And these things are certainly true, but they're not all of who Jesus is. So I invite you today to think of Jesus in a different way. I accidentally rhymed doing that. I didn't realize that. It wasn't on purpose, but you will find it happens all the time. Last week we were talking about Jesus' sermon on the plain. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. But remember that Jesus' disciples first saw him as a teacher. So in the spirit of this, I imagine they had some questions that were probably not written down in the gospel like we know it today. So as Jesus is saying, the blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, Peter probably said something like, Jesus, are we supposed to write this down? And Andrew says, well, Jesus, is this going to be on a test? Philip probably says, I haven't got a pen. And James probably says, do the other disciples have to learn this? And Matthew says, when are we ever going to use this in real life? And some Pharisees who were probably near were like, Jesus, can we see your lesson plan? Were the learning objectives clearly communicated to the class before the lesson? Were you able to show that you used a range of teaching strategies that differentiate according to the student's current attainment needs? How will you show and demonstrate 3 levels of progress over the distance of this course? And that is the true reason why Jesus wept. No. So, seeing Jesus as a teacher is certainly one way that we can reframe how we think of him, but I think there's another one that is very culturally significant to us now. I think Jesus knows what hate is. I think, and I don't think he knows this just because he shares in some part of God's infinite wisdom. Jesus himself lives as a Jewish man during a time of Roman occupation. He probably experienced hate for who he was during that time. The Romans are probably looking down on the people that they're governing because they see them as less than. They're a conquered people. They had less military might, so therefore they're less. The Romans had the stronger army. They had the resources and means to govern the area. But from the Israelite side, they're not only being forced to accept this authority, but they're actively having to be in partnership with a leader, Caesar, who not only started a military campaign and won against them, but also claims that he is divine. And that's directly opposite of these people's beliefs. So knowing what hate means as a word and a concept is very different from experiencing it themselves. But here Jesus is, being so familiar with seeing hate, it's like an old friend. And Jesus is speaking to a group of people from this experience. It's so easy to write Jesus' words off as platitudes, but we can't forget the context that he's teaching out of. Maybe the reason why we boil down Jesus' identity to just one or two things is because it gives us an excuse to not listen during those times that it's really inconvenient. But knowing how ugly, how violent, how conniving and dangerous and insidious hate is as a force, Jesus still steps into that and speaks directly to that. Maybe that's part of Jesus' power in the world, to show us a better way, to show that, yes, even in the midst of all this hate, God still wins. God doesn't even let human hate get in the way of showing us a better path, showing us how to live with one another instead of living in spite of one another. There's an interesting word choice in this passage in Greek. Verses 32, 33, 34, Jesus asks three questions that are translated, "What credit is that to you?" If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? If you lend from those whom you expect to receive payment, what credit is that to you? The word translated here for credit in Greek is the word charis. I can't do the like guttural very well. That's like charis, you know. It's the same word that's used for grace. So keeping in mind, what if Jesus' question was reframed using that word instead? If you love those who love you, how is this showing God's grace to them? If you love those only who love you, how is that showing grace? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good just to those who do good to you, how is this showing grace to them? For even sinners do the same. If you lend from those whom you expect to receive payment, how is this showing grace to them? For even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Jesus' rhetorical question here point us to the transactional nature that we as humans just absolutely love. And I do mean love because we are so ingrained to think that our actions and relationships in terms of what we get and what we give, we get it confused for our values. But Jesus' way is not transactional. In fact, he warns us against it. When we are feeling helpless or frustrated or angry, when we want things to change, we're going to be tempted to do an eye for an eye, to lash out in the ways that humans have always lashed out. We can yell unkind words, and unkind really doesn't do them justice, though, because words that land on the person that we're speaking to, we want to hurt. They're like blows from our fists, or they cut deep like we're wielding knives. But we can choose to forgive and maintain our relationships only with the people that we agree with, the people that has that transactional balance. And we could provide resources in the same way. We only provide resources to the people that fit our framework, those who deserve it. Those who we see as unworthy, we justify withholding it. And these will always be temptations, always. It's human nature. But Jesus tells us that there's a better way. More than likely, Jesus is teaching people that are within sight of a Roman soldier, equipped to kill, maybe even looking for an excuse to do so. Maybe the justification is to prevent a rebellion. But Jesus' life is lived side by side with his enemies, literal enemies. This isn't a soft and fluffy, hypothetical exercise of the mind. It's a way of living that is hard. It's a way of living that people will judge you, will scorn you, will call you weak, crazy, or a whole host of other things. But Jesus' way is good. Listen to his words one more time. Write them on your mind and in your heart. But I say to you, those who are listening, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone strikes you on a cheek, offer the other one also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, Do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who asks of you. And if anyone takes away what is yours, do not ask for it back again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. May you discover this week that there is power in responding with mercy. May you discover that there is power in kindness. And that power is much more vindicative than that moment of happiness you get when retaliating. May you rediscover that you are a child of the Most High. And along with that insurmountable joy comes a pretty hard responsibility to emulate it. And in that struggle, may we remember that God is with us as we do so. Amen.